Welcome, underachievers. Today we're going to be checking your assortment of PvP skills with a higher focus on the PvP side. So basically, what the distribution you kind of want is to have 3 PvE characters and 3 PvP characters. In that way you can do pretty much everything in the game with your 3 PvE, and they can stay in base and somehow do some base defense and stuff like that, all at the same time holding their tasks. And also be able to fight, right? And then you have the 3 PvP characters that you can use for IBs. You can use them in faraway wars, or you can use them for base defense. So right now my setup is pretty much. So this is my main character. My main character always has the same kind of build. He's a shieldman, swordsman, spearman, and I'm usually blacksmith and sometimes builder. Last time I was also a miner instead of like being a builder, but this time around we needed one. So yeah. Um, we already talked about the PvE builds and all of their skills and whatnot, so we're gonna mostly focus on the PvP one for this one. So, what are the PvP lines? So the PvP lines, the first one is cavalry, obviously associated with the horses. The second one is the spears and guards and whatnot. The third one is the swordsman and the shields. The fourth one is the range stuff, so from thrower to archery and whatnot. And then the fifth one is the berserker, probably the most used one, and it has probably the best armor and the best kind of weapons. But we're gonna go into each of them specifically. And then we have four separate characters that are not part of a tree line at the bottom: unit formation, equip and maintain, battle survival, and demolition. So let's dive into them. So pretty much cavalry, in this case, is the first one on the skill tree line. What you want to do is basically get 30 to unlock the next one. So it's pretty much like the PV skills like we talked in the other video. Um, we want to be able to have the second going higher than 30, and to do that you need the first one at 60. So for example, I have 60 militia and I can go 100 in spearmen. So it's the 60s that the little threshold that you need to break to get the next one to go fully, even if you don't use the weapons or the horses or whatever you're doing from the first tier skill, right? So, cavalry has a couple of different setups. So, as soon as you can see, like, don't forget the stats that give underneath each PvP skill when you're training them, when you're using the weapons. If you want to do stat readjustment, that is right there below the name. So, cavalry is pretty much what allows you to use horses. So, the cavalry 0 allows you to basically use a one-handed when on top of a horse. You can see the usable items for each PvP skill. So, for example, with cavalry 0, you can use the practice bastard. With 30, you unlock the big falcon and the tier 1 armor. That's pretty much common for all the armors along the way, as we're going to see. With 60, you can use the Bastard Sword. That's a really cool sword and really useful. And you have a lower chance of falling from the saddle at 90. The 100 is just for the trick moves. The 100 increases like 2-3% your damage. It's not too much. So most of the times you do want to go 90. The 100 just kind of to show off, or if you have extra points and time. The knight ones, you start to unlock the knight sword. At 30, you basically don't unlock anything besides the tier 2 armor, the regular chainmail. At 60, you basically have the chances that you basically will go against the pikes, the enemy pikes, and it might not harm you, so you have less chance of that. But the most important one is you can ride Spiriton and Hardy war horses. Hardys are probably the most common horses used in IBs and in wars, and maybe the war horses as well, depending on the quality of them. And you get the Iron Grip. Many people like to play with it. I'm going to show you my cavalry in a bit, but I do not use this one on mine. The Iron Grip is kind of good. You kind of get immune to falling out if you're using heavies and you're going through a bunch of people. That's a really useful one, especially versus anti-cav and stuff like that. The Lancer itself, basically you get access to the jousting lance and decorated jousting lance and lances and whatnot. As you unlock him, you can see here the usable items in each skill. You also unlock in this case, the tier 3, and then at 90, the tier 4. You also use the lance, so the most common ones are the lance and probably the decorated lance, but you do need 90 for the decorated one. The different types of lances have different types of damage. We're going to see in a bit, but you can ride heavy war horses at 60, and the lance does become easier to use at 60 as well. So basically, the jousting lance, the normal one, it does all blunt damage. As you move to the normal lance, it actually starts doing piercing when you thrust, and then you're gonna be doing with the decorated jousting lance. You do piercing when you thrust, and you do blunt on the swing as well. So yeah, the lenses have a little bit different hitboxes and whatnot, and a bit different sizes, but you'll get used to them. And when you do have 100 in Lancer, you can actually use the Royal War Horses, and when you use them, basically like the heart goes crazy at your feet. I'm gonna show you in a bit. The spearman's build and the militia skill line. Don't forget you have these actions here that everybody has at 0, but you have the trick moves. That's what you unlock at 100. The coup de courage, the grace, the coup of grace. You basically is the way to kill enemies. So when you knock somebody's soft HP down, you can coup the grace or you can enslave them. Those are the two options. I usually have mine in 5 and C or 5 and 6, but coup the grace or enslave are both good when you knock down somebody. You have the flee that you should always have somewhere in your bar, like when you're PvEs, or even in wars, but you cannot interact with stuff. Don't forget to use that one. But you can basically drag this. Don't forget. You have your action bars that you can move all the way around and whatnot. So you want to be sure that you're using them properly. So in this case, the YL doesn't do much; it just makes you kneel and basically give up. Maybe somebody will be merciful. But these are where you unlock all the tools, and you can swing tools based on your militia. Don't forget, the more higher the level of skill you have, the more damage you'll be doing. So, for example, if I want to be using a falcon or a bastard sword, if I have 90 cavalry, I'm going to be doing more damage than the 60. So if you have a 80 quality bastard made of steel, you're not going to be using it to full potential unless you have 80 or 90 cavalry, because they will be capped by the skill level you have, right? In this case, you also in the militia you basically use the pitchforks only, but it unlocks the tier 1, so you don't very few people use that. Some people like the work site at 60, and you can use a special attack when you stun somebody. That's kind of a good one. You have there was people playing the arenas with the 90 militia lot to parry. If you parry against the pole weapon, you basically would steal their weapons. That was kind of funny to watch, but I was never very good at that. Some people also do it at wars, but that has been removed from arena like last patch or something like that. That would be kind of funny to watch. The spearman, you kind of unlock all the type of pikes that you can. So the short pike, medium pike, and long pike at 30, 60, 90. You also have the boar spears, which is pretty much the bread and butter of most spearmen. It's still a really powerful piercing weapon, but you always know that's a thrust attack because you can see the damage differences there. The war sight is also the wall pike is also really good. In this case, like sometimes I do use the wall pike. The boar spear depends. Like for arenas, for fighting, I do prefer the boar spear. I'm just way too used to it, but the wall pike is not a bad replacement. In case you want to do some little bit extra damage, you can check the values when hitting a dummy or hitting a friend or playing an arena with them. The short pikes are mostly used against horses, although there is a mate called Baldric that does like to go crazy on them pikes. Other abilities as you unlock is the wall of pikes bonus when using a pike type of weapon, which is really good against horses and deals severe damage to them. That's really good. Just hitting the body of the horse is sometimes easier than hitting the horseman itself. This is more of the anti-cav line, but we'll speak about that in a second. The to use shields and spears at the same time, you do need the 90, so this is a really important one to get at spearman, which you can use all of them except the back of Korban, that can only be used alone. Without the shield, you can use the shield on your back, but not necessarily in with the same time with the spear. And also you have the special attack on a knockdown person. This is this is a really useful combo. Then in this case, this is my main character, and I do that a lot. So basically, when you're gonna actually test it in one of the mates, if they're still around here. Actually, one of the mates is watching. I'm not going to do that to him. He's not. I just wanted to demonstrate. So basically, when you knock down somebody, you basically have the special attack. You can do this special attack here. And that special attack allows you to do extra damage to the mate. So that's the one we're talking about there at the 90. Now I have to run away because he's going to come after me. What we talk about the trick moves is basically if you have your spear on you, you basically can do trick moves with the weapons, but that's pretty much if you have the extra skill points that time to level it to 100 is not really necessary in any way, shape, or form. It just does the 2-3% increase. The guard is a really good one. The guard is it has a bit more to offer than the pikes, so the pikes are really static in a sense. We might show it in a bit with my anti-cav cav. Um, or in a later video that we're going to do with the mixed builds, so like different variations of builds that you can do within. Today we're just going to be pretty much doing an overview of the builds and talking about some of the most common ones. But with the guard, you can basically use the Gizarm or the polearm. It depends on your poleaxe. It depends on your preferences. But I really enjoy the Gizarm versus horses. So basically, you want to be doing the overhead attack, and this is basically done after hitting a special horse. After hitting a horse, so it's a special attack that unlocks after that. And also, when you parry your opponents, you also get a special attack. So we're going to talk about special attacks in a bit, because all the classes are different, and you'll have to figure out the ones for your class. Like that symbol that appeared when I shield knocked somebody, that symbol will always appear, and you have to figure out for your weapons what kind of attacks you're gonna do as a, as you have the special. So when I shield bash somebody, so I have my shield, I knock them down, I do the thrust attack, and the thrust attack does that thing that raises the spear up and knocks and goes down on the mate, and it does a bit of special damage, and it has a chance to apply wound if I'm not mistaken, but you'll see that when you do it. Also, the knight, you get the chance to throw the rider of the handle, like we said, of the saddle with the overhead attack with these weapons, so it's really useful. The guard 90, I just more not of an anti-cav. I'm more like smart for arenas and have some fun around the base and base defend. Footman is pretty much like the normal, is usually the secondary line of the PvPers. So basically, what you usually want to be doing with the footman is deciding if you want to use axes, swords, or the Earthskull weapons. So basically, the Earthskull weapons are uh, the short kind of type of weapons, and they're really more for every kind of people or really fast people that you want to do a blend of damage. We're going to get into that in a bit. Swordsman is obviously the swords and one-hander swords mostly. The footman is basically the axes, so it's usually real fast, takes little stamina, one-handed axes, and you have a lot of combos to do with them. So for example, while the cavalier does have a lot of stuff that happens on top of a horse, the spearman does have a lot of stuff that happens when enemies are knocked down or versus horses and a couple of those things. Swordsman have a lot of, it's the one that has the combos together with the berserkers. So the ones with the swords and axes is you start having combos that you have to do in a sequence, right? So footman, let's look into that and see what combos it unlocks. So at 30 as the other ones, you'll unlock the tier 1. The war axe is one of the first weapons you have a lot in early game and you smack a lot with. Very little stamina, you can do a lot of damage besides shopping, besides thrusting, sorry. It does shopping damage, it's kind of good, like all the axes pretty much do shopping. Um, you also unlock the early shields, the tire shield and stuff like that. It's a good early shield to kind of practice with and play with your mates against. The skill splitter is really nice, but it's hard to land. So like these axes one-hander are small. So the right slash overhead and left slash and then the reverse with the sides. So basically most of the combos usually work with the right or left and then overhead or thrust and variations of that. But like when the combo usually starts with the right, it enhances in the left, you can reverse those and still do the combo, right? That applies to almost all combos. And this gives the last, it will guarantee a fracture on your opponent. We'll get into fractures in a bit, and when we talk about strengths and stats. The power strike is an unblockable hit, so that's really good. Like if you're fighting Vested Shields and you're with your axe, you can definitely ensure that you're doing some damage through and that you're applying fractures to people carrying shields, and maybe you'll mess up their weapons. We'll see that in a bit. The ability to use their weapon. So the other one is the knock knock. This is a really nice one for the axes. Basically, if you do 3 overheads in a row with one hand axes, you basically triple the damage to a shield hit. So it's the axes are really good versus shields, but you really need to be in their face. So basically, you're subjecting yourself to be shield bashed, like we saw with the spearman, for example, like or with another shield that we're going to see later. So swordsman, this might be the most used secondary build. Basically, it does depend on. It has a couple of variations, but swordsman is really common with pretty much a secondary for anything. Besides secondary for berserkers, just because berserkers have two enders. But basically, for the one-ended sword, at 0 you don't unlock anything, swordsman. Um, at uh, at uh, at 30 swordsman, you basically unlock the Nordic sword and the falchion. Many people do like these weapons. The Nordic sword is a thrusting, so it's a version of kind of almost a spear. It's that Roman style sword and does a lot of damage piercing, but it's like the spear in the sense of that also like you know what kind of swing they're going to do just because the thrust does so much damage, so it's a bit easier to parry and to measure. The falcon is a really good bread and butter swordsman kind of weapon. The heater shield is one of the good starting shields, even not only starting, and it also unlocks the tier 2. So you basically unlock a special attack. It's like the spear. that's the special attack that you do after a successful block. So if you block somebody, you can do an overhead attack, and it will be a really fast one. Really nice to see. We're gonna be putting some arenas video later on to show how some of these combos work and whatnot. So basically, also at 60 you unlock at the shield bash attack, which is the same um, as the spear. So when you shield bash somebody, you have the procs a special attack if you have the sword out, and you can basically do the thrusting, and it will do the vertical attack towards the mate, but instead of a spear you have a sword. You have the flurry of bows, the right thrust left or left thrust right. That's a really common useful one. It's like the axe one, and you have the power strike effect in the last hit. After a successful block against your opponents, you get that special one as well with the overhead, and unlocks a special attack which can be performed on a knockdown person. So basically, that's the same thingy that we saw before with the spear. So this one, it does unlock two of the most common used swords: the scimitar and the grossmaster. The grossmaster is probably the most used one. Um, Although Scimitar is also quite used, but unlocks a hell lot of shields. Like you have to, depending on who you're fighting with, you do want to have a different kind of selection of shields. I really like the heavy tart shield for turtling, for example. So we're gonna get into that in a bit. But turtling is just basically when you're having your sword out, instead of having the sword in the shield in your hand, you basically put the shield in your back. So like you can see here, if I'm doing right, if I'm doing rotation like that, I'm a bit more exposed on my sword hand side. Um, but basically, like if I'm looking down, I can grab somebody's legs much more easily, and just then I turtle, and the only thing they kind of see is my shield. You have to go like for my head or for my feet. It depends on what you're playing against, and turtling can sometimes will do great results. Um, Besides that, well, it's basically a matter of flavor. So if there is a mate that I fight a lot with and is really good at going over my shield. So for example, if I'm doing spearman, shieldman, you can see that there's a part of my shield that doesn't cover my head and doesn't cover my legs. So because that mate is really good at getting good head hits and leg hits, what I usually try to do in those cases is fight with them with one of the longer variations of shields. So like when you're trying to block stuff, you basically want to be blocking the direction, kind of like the parry, but obviously it's a bit more forgiving. Um, but sometimes you have to look really to the sides. So for example, if you're fighting a shift and sword and the gentleman is in front of you, you basically have to look to the upper right to kind of block that because it's just a wide hitbox. So depending on who you're fighting against, what type of attacks they are using most or not, you can basically uh, switch up switch up your shields and stuff like that, and practice all of them. Some of them are a bit heavier than others, so like try to take that into your advantage. All of them are quite good, all of them are usable. It just really depends on what you prefer. At 90, you do unlock the ability to sprint while covering Gala shield. This is really useful. So sometimes it's really hard to shield bash if you don't have you cannot sprint while shielding. So for example, basically, if I was behind the shield and I couldn't run, this is already the fast movement of the shield, fast running with the shield. Because if you couldn't, that would be basically this speed. So only going this and try to shield bash people. Yes, if you're in a castle tower wall or something like that, maybe you don't need that. But for most purposes in arenas or 1v1s, like you're gonna have a bit of open ground, and if you don't have the run at 90, it's really tricky to shield bash somebody or anything like that. Um, apparently it also unlocks 1,000 cuts, so it's a guaranteed bleeding on the third hit. That's a really good one with one hander or half hand and a half. So for example, the one hand and a half as for example the knight sword or the bastard sword, those are hand and a half, so basically they can be used with two hands or with one hand. But all of the berserker ones are, we're going to see two handers, so they're not hand and a half, so usually that's a common thing to go with the cavalier for the guaranteed bleed. And you also have the special attack that can be performed after drawing a weapon from your belt. So basically if I have my weapon here, I take it and I can perform a special attack, right? So you want to be doing that sometimes you versus some people, you want to be doing that attack. So this is the one. So basically draw your weapon. I'm going to put it away and reduce it. This is just to show you the examples of some of them. And you do a overhead attack and you basically poke somebody. So this is not a thrust. Like the thrust is this one. But you see the symbol there of the combo, and this is normal thrust. It didn't do a special attack. This time I'm going to do overhead, and it looks like a thrust. It pulls the weapon a little bit backwards, and then does a special attack. If I do it over again, it go back to normal, right? Some weapons do have this ability, depending on your skill trees. Then you have the Herskull, like we said, it's like shorter weapons, but they're really good in some people's hands or keyboards. This one, the cudgel, is really used to enslave people really early on, so a lot of people try to go for that to then smack people in the head with a cudgel and then enslave them. Bandits really like that weapon. But then you have some heavier hit ones, the flanged mace and the tier 3 are unlocked at 30. Also with the iron round shield, it's not a bad shield to be fair. The shields in here skull are pretty much a little bit more heavier. You have that one and the tower shield. Tower shield is probably the biggest shield in the game, but it is the heaviest, so it covers a lot of your area, body area. It's really good for shield walls and stuff, but it's really heavy as well. So at this one you also get a special attack when you parry, so that one is useful in some situations. Um, and you have the point of vulnerability at 60, so with it sets another combo: overhead left slash right slash, or overhead left slash right slash left slash with the maces. So you have to check, like when you have a combo, check what types of weapons it says in parentheses underneath it, next to it, because you'll know which weapons you can use to get that special combo. Sometimes you get combo, for example, for the 1.5, like it said in the swordsman, but in this case it's only for the one-handed maces. This is a chance to knock down a mate. So if you do get this combo going with a third hit, you have a chance to knock a mate down. And you have the special attacks that you can perform after stunning. So you knock them down, or they're stunned, and you have the special attack if you do stun them. The two weapons on 60 Earth Skull are the Morningstar and the War Pike. It's more of a flavor. A lot of people like these weapons. Many people don't use them. Many people don't know how to use them. You need to be really up close, and it's really tricky sometimes, like with some of these weapons. But they're really powerful. If you get up close and kind of hiking the mates, that's a really good one. So at 90 Earth Skull, you basically you have another hole, which is another combo: overhead left slash overhead. This is a special one with the one-handed maces, and that's the guaranteed fracture. So you're basically guaranteeing you have chances to knock down. You're guaranteed the fractures. That's a really good one. The Earth Skull line, but it's not too used. Many people are really good at it. But yeah, that's pretty much it. So, ranger stuff. Thrower is kind of strange. So the best one to get a thrower, like most of the stones and all that stuff, doesn't matter much, but unless you're null clearing or stuff like that, or really in the early game. Throwing knives are kind of good. The same thing with throwing axes and javelins. They can do a lot of damage. They're basically like weapons you keep like stacks of 3 or 5, depending on what weapon it is, and then you put them on 1, 2, and you kind of use them, and then you have to replenish them. The naphtha pots are really common. They now changed, so now it has required strength and agility. It didn't back in the day have the required agility and stuff to use. I'm not sure how they're working right now, but naphtha pots are really strong if you have good alchemists and good naphtha to use. They can be really strong versus horses, versus people, versus clumped up people trying to break like into the wall. True is fun. It's a cool build. Archer is pretty much the let's say the it unlocks a couple of abilities for the crossbows and the arrows and the bows, but it's like a faster, less strength heavy build than the ranger, and does less damage, but it's much more mobile. So you have the light crossbows in the beginning, and you unlock different types of bolts and arrows as you go along these two lines. You can use the arrow stand. The arrow stand is something that you put on the ground as an archer, and then you basically can draw arrows from there. You basically reload a little bit faster, both with while you're using it. It doesn't necessarily have arrows. You just to be able, like, you basically when you're standing in a castle tower, you can put the arrow stand there, and you're basically like reloading or having your speed of shooting increased. Most of the arrows used in wars and whatnot are pretty much the normal arrows. But if you're fighting against, there's some situations that you can or bolts. But in some situations, you do want to use the dull ones or even specialized ones like the piercing ones, the broadhead arrows, the broad bootkin. But most of the times you'll have just thousands and thousands and thousands of normal arrows and normal bolts. But it depends on what you're fighting against, right? One of common use, for example, for the dull arrows is, for example, versus lancers. So if you actually hit the lancer in the head, I believe, you can knock him down. You'll keep unlocking better speed and roughly loading and better aiming. We're going to talk about stats in a bit, but those matter a lot for archers. You can create the arrow stand at 60, and you have stomping power. Stomping power is really useful for the crossbow. It basically stuns the enemy for 1 second when you land the hit. It's really strong, and you unlock the two most common types of bows in this case, which would be the short bow and the composite bow. They're really good to start with. We're going to see a variation of my PvE farmer base defender that basically uses these two bows. The short bow is a really weird curve, but It's a fun one because it's the short bow kind of, you have to shoot it like in a C kind of shape, like, right? It makes it a bell. While the composite's already more like more of a straight line kind of shooting. It's a little bit easier for me. I prefer that one. And at 90 you have the arrow to the knee, which is really useful because it slows down opponents. Um, and basically, if you hit them in the leg, does increase the slowing chance, increase the slowing increase by 50%. It's really strong. I used to be a fighter, but I took arrow to the knee or something from Skyrim, right? Um, the Ranger is more of like the heavier stuff, so it requires usually more strength and more agility to use. We're gonna go into stats in a bit, I remind you. But basically, like the earliest one is the Arbalist. So early on with Zero Ranger, when you get to unlock the Zero Ranger in the first few hours or the first moments, you do use the Herbalist a lot. But then as you progress, you really want to make your way to the 60 and 90. You have the Pavis Shield, which is like a Ranger shield only. That's the only shield in this line, and it's really common to use by the archer, especially with crossbows, because you basically can use a sword. You can basically have the bolts in number 2, so the bolts don't take the space on 3 and 4, while the arrows do. So arrows, for example, you cannot use a shield. You have to exchange your shield for the arrows. Um, the Pavis is a shield as well, so it goes to usually the secondary two hands thingy. So it goes to the 4. But if you're using bolts, because you have sword, bolts, crossbow, and shield, you can have the 1, 2, 3, 4 completely full, and you can switch weapons easily. You don't have to be changing shields by arrows or stuff like that. In my Warfront, right, in that Warfront character, I do that because I do prefer the longbow a little bit more. Um, the use Pavis is basically the Pavis in front of you. So if you're in a place that you're going to be for a while, or in a castle tower that you want to block some of the angles off, you can put that up and basically use it as a defensive thingy. Um, you get the piercing bolt and create the defensive fence. So defensive fence is used a lot in instance battles. You can check the video from yesterday, IBs, and you see a lot of defensive fences around. Those are really good versus horses. They deal eye damage to the horses. It's beautiful. The piercing bolt is basically you can shoot a crossbow and it will go through people. So it goes through 3 people in the line. So if you're shooting the crossbow in front of you, there's 3 people. It goes through the 3 of them. It's useful but situational. And only applies to crossbows. It doesn't apply to bows. So yeah, take that into account. But you unlock two of the most used weapons in archery, which is the heavy crossbow and the longbow. It's a matter of flavor. If you like bowing or crossbowing, um, the stats will change how they work as well. But like in my Warfront fighter, depending on what we have available, I'll use both. But I do prefer the longbow. You do a little bit less damage, 15 to 20 less damage with headshots and torso shots. But yeah, you can spam a little bit more. It's easier to chase some enemies down. The heavy crossbow, you really don't want. If you're sitting in a tower, that's a good one because you're going to be completely safe. You don't need to chase somebody down, and you were a bit slower, obviously, than shooting the longbow, but you can do a lot more damage. It's really useful. The volley is also situational. Sometimes it's useful if you have a lot of enemies trying to break through. They exploded a wall and they're trying to get in. You can volley them easily, and you unlock the tier 4 at 90 Ranger. Um, yeah, that's pretty much everything about it. You do unlock some firework bolts and firework arrows and stuff like that. That can be kind of fun as well. So Berserker. This is the most common used line. This is the last one of the video today, at least from the main skill trees of PvP. And you have the Assaulter. The Assaulter basically is the two-hander swords. So after you do a parry, you can do an overhead attack that has a special attack. We're gonna show it later in the arenas like the others. I pretty much all the skill trees because of my 3 PvP years and 2 PvP years. I can basically do everything in a way. But I'll show you those in arenas later on. Basically, the 4 weapons that you are going to be using a lot with the Assaulter, Estoc and Claymore are not the most common ones, but they're good, especially the Estoc. And the bread and butter of the Assaulter is the Zweihander and the Flammy. So what do you unlock skill wise? So the parry and the overhead attack is really common. You get special attacks after they parry. You get special attacks when you parry. So this is like the 60 you unlock the special attack after the successful parry against your opponent. But at 30 is when they parry you, and then you do the thrust. So you can be waiting. It's more of like a waiting game in a sense because you want to parry them, and sometimes when they parry you, you want to do the special attack, and you unlock the tier 1. The plate armor is probably the best armor in the game. Like people sometimes go the assaulter line just to get the armor, and then they go to their preferred weapons like a crossbow or something like that, or you know, just because the armor is so good and so great. Some extensions the arms have been done, but they still continue. They're still quite powerful against a lot of things. Whenever you want to see the armor, I haven't spoken about this, but whenever you want to see the armor damage reduction, you can check it on the right hand side. So, for example, this one has a lot of slashing and chopping. The leather armor um, has a lot of resistance against siege, but not too good versus the others. So you can check the individual armor stats, and we might make a video about armors and all the benefits and whatnot. Tier 1s and Tier 2s are the most commonly used ones because Tier 3s and Tier 4s are way too heavy, but we'll get to that in a bit. So Power Overwhelming is one of the most common used combos in the game. It's the thrust with a right swing, left swing, or vice versa with a right swing, left swing variation. In this case, the last hit is a powerful strike that's a really easy one to land, and these weapons are quite big, so it's easy to keep people out of your range. Um, the powerful roaming is quite useful in many situations. You also have the shifting sword, the null shifting sword, which they are going for quite a bit in the market right now, and they can be really useful. They have a gigantic hitbox. All of these weapons have different parry hitboxes and stuff, so you'll have to practice a lot with them and practice against the hitbox of your opponent's weapons as well. The 90 is really good because of the dismember. So if you do overhead left swing thrust or overhead right swing thrust, you have a chance to knock down your mate in the last hit. That can be really good, and you get the drawing your weapon. So we're gonna see that in a bit in a berserker. But basically, you have the same combo symbol appears whenever every time you take the weapon out. The same thing with the sword, with the swordsman one. And the Hunter is pretty much the same with the trick move. The Vanguard is for the axes, so you're going to be doing axes or sledgehammers or mauls. So the Vanguard is pretty much the heavy hitters of the game. The tier for use the tier 2, you need the 30 Vanguard. It also knocks down an ability on a knockdown opponent, and also after stunning. The sledgehammers are really common to destroy walls and palisades during only Judgment Hours, HGHs, because of the siege damage. They're really good versus palisades, versus stone walls, sometimes versus castle walls, but those you want to be doing usually a different way. Bardishes are good, really good early vanguard weapons. But some people do like it at wars as well. They have like a gigantic white thing. You look like an executioner from a Harry Potter movie or something. Probably not the best movie to think about executioners, but I just remember that little hippogriff. Poor guy. 60, you unlock the execution. So the overhead, left swing, right swing. This is probably the most used one. So just straight overhead. If you land that one, then you have right and left. It's easy. Those are easy to land. If the attack was blocked with a shield, that's even better. So like the shieldman, we're gonna go into different types of PvP versus each other. There is a bit of a rock paper system sometimes, but this is really good versus Shieldman. The crunchy left slash overhead right slash. It's not too much common with the maces, but some people do it. I'm not really experienced with maces. I use maces and mauls and sledgehammers and stuff more versus null camp than versus people, but that can come in handy. But this has the broad axe, which is one of the most common ones. They have nerfed it a lot, but it's still like probably the most used weapon, even compared to the Flemmies and Zweihanders. Just a small note in the Flemmies and Zweihanders, which is that the only difference between them is they're a matter of flavor. Um, they pretty much the weight the same. The Flamby is a bit heavier, but it has much more slashing and no thrusting, while the Zweihander has a little bit more thrust naturally. So if you're more of the thrusting kind types of combos, do go for the Zweihander, but take a feel for it. You're probably going to use the one that you have the first skin for, but it's really a matter of flavor, and you get used to them weapons. Um, uh, Quite in the same way with regards to hitboxes and whatnot. You can still do the combos with the other, just like, for example, I like to start a lot with the thrust, so um, usually if I land a thrust and not the others, I'll be doing a little bit more damage with one rather than the other. In the Vanguard, this Brodax is really good and it's shopping, but that's the type of damage that many people don't have protection versus, or at least many armors. But you have to land a hit with the edge of it, right? So you're doing a lot of blunt if you fail it. So you have to calculate your distance really well, but it's a really, really good weapon. It's used a lot in IBs, in wars. It's really good. The maul is mostly used versus people that are using other plate armor, for example, because plate armor is the best, so having a maul is never bad. Because blunt damage does get a lot of damage versus plate armor, but for example not versus padded, because padded armor, the anti-cav one, that basically counters that blunt damage part. The null barracks is not used, like nobody uses this. Like the wedge is way too irregular. If it was a bit longer in some way, maybe it could work, but it really doesn't. In many ways, it's mostly used for clearing other null camps, not necessarily versus people. At 90, you get the Kneel Before Me combo, so you can see the overhead thrust overhead with the two-handed maces. Those are usually good. Um, and you also have the one after a successful parry. And to end off, you have the Berserker, which is not necessarily fighting one. I mean, it is fighting, but it's not with regards to weapons or armors. This one unlocks the shouts. So these shouts, you can basically drag them to your bar, right? So I can put my shout here. You can drag all of the shouts that you have on your Berserker bar. It also unlocks the tier 3s and tier 4 armors and 30 and 60. The shouts are pretty much simple, but these are one of the reasons people go berserker with. This is probably a bit rude, and we're not going to be doing it in the video, but I'll show you the shouts in my berserker in a bit. And basically, this one increases your strength for a little bit. So if you get fracture, you can taunt, and basically your strength might be over the fracture point. We'll get to fractures and strengths in a bit. And then you have the coward. So like if a person is not in fighting stance, so for example right now I'm not in a fighting stance, so if somebody cowers me, I can go back to fighting stance, and I cannot be cowarded. But this happens sometimes when you have to climb pits. Let's say, sorry for the state of this side of the base. The other one is looking better. But imagine you need to climb a little hill. So for example, you have a little road that you have to climb, and in this case, like I can climb this one with my swords. But for example, for this, people get stuck on these ones. So you want to leave your fighting stance to climb over this the V pit. And what you want to do in this V pits, if you are with a weapon, usually take it out and you climb. But this means I'm exposed to assaulters to kind of shouting coward to me because I'm not in my fighting stance. I can be called a coward. After a while, this is gonna stun me down. So basically, what happens? What happens with when you're covered? You basically get stunned and you drop down to the ground, which then removes your fighting stance again. And even if you put it after, you get called coward. And not being in fighting stance already does like 50% extra damage to you. So you always want to be in fighting stance when you're fighting and doing stuff. Sometimes people prepare their bases so you have to leave fighting stance and they have ability to coward, shield bash you, and all that stuff. But you know, uh, that's more of that's more of taking opportunity of the geography and of the terrain and whatnot. Um, R is also a really good one. So any slowing and poisoning gets removed. It doesn't seem like much, but in a war setting it can be. We'll talk about poisoning in a bit. The your mine, it increases, it makes an enemy vulnerable, and it basically increases your speed for a bit. So if you're chasing somebody, you can cover them, they will fall down. In your mine, you can chase them and close the gap between them. And the proper taunt is really not polite. We're not going to be getting into that one, but it's pretty much like the other. It's pretty much like a taunt, but it is a bit more descriptive. So this is all for the five main PvP builds. Then you have like the secondary PvP skills in a sense. They are pretty much individuals. This is not the tree line, while the others were. In this case, you have unit information. So basically, you have three basic formations: wall formation, wedge, and circle. They differ different stats. The wall formation gives a bit more defensive. The wedge gives you a bit more speed. But the circle formation is the most common used one, just because it gives you a lot of breeding and it's a really well balanced skill formation, so it's really good to use in wars. So basically you invite somebody to your group and you choose a formation, and then basically the rest of the tree will unlock the hold your ground, which basically increases defense but decreases speed. You have the 60, you unlock the charge, so basically for 20 seconds increases damage you deal to enemies. You also receive more bonuses from all this information and stuff. And you have the move at 90, which is really good when just trying to catch up with the mates or running away from the mates. This move can be completely overpowered. Not many people go the 100, it becomes orange, and then many people don't like that. Equipment maintain is pretty much useless most of the time, unless you are in a dire situation in the Warfront that you don't have too many repair kits. But basically what it does is decreases the max durability of your weapon when you're repairing. So when you're using weapons, basically the weapon will start taking durability as more to use it. The same thing with shields, and you can repair it, and you're more efficient repairing it with equipment maintain. Um, but you're basically lowering the max durability. So you see there the number 170 for the city quality. If I use my equipment repair maintain on it, so I could right click and oh, this character actually cannot. Um, Basically because it's probably full durability. Yes, this is full durability. So like actually let's equip this one so I can show you in a not full durability one. So let's see. So now I equip this one. So this one has 168. I can maintain equipment here, and the more you have, it will help. But that's really rarely used. You really want to be using repair kits not to mess up your weapons, because then if you have higher, lower, high max durability, it means that you will have to repair more often, and it will go down, down, down until it becomes pretty much like every swing you basically need to repair it, which is not useful at all. The only thing good about equipment maintain, or the best thing, is the apply poison at 90. This only works with one-handed weapons, so we're talking about footman, swordsman, and earth skull, but this supply poison, it can be really good in some cases. We're gonna showcase in the second video about PvP builds a lot of mixes. Like this is not too common one, but if you have a good cocktail maker in your guild, like this can become huge. But it's hard sometimes because of logistics. You have to be sending different types of poisons to the war. You have to know which poison to apply. We're gonna get into that in a later video. Battle survival is kind of good. So battle survival, you can actually treat some of the wounds and stuff without having to go for the normal healing one with 90, 60 healing. You can also treat fractures and stuff, but this one you can treat, you can bandage yourself as well. You cannot treat all the wounds by yourself, but you can bandage a couple of fractures and stuff like that in a worse situation if you don't have a healer. But basically, you always want to go 90 healing and have a mate heal you as well, because you can do severe injuries and then it treats all the wounds, all the fractures, head, torso, and whatnot. What it does at 60, 90 as well is that it converts like the damage you would be taking. Um, to soft HP. So it means like if you're, I've survived so many times, especially in the Chinese server. I went with 100 battle survivability on my Zerker. So many gears were saved with me being 1 HP, 1 hard HP. Because basically, like what it says, it makes you survive that last little bit in the end, because it converts a lot of damage to soft. And in some more situations, you're taking a lot of damage from every side if you have a lot of enemies and friendly hits. but um, but yeah, you basically like you run a lot of times out of the battlefield with 1 HP, just because of that. Because of the conversion to soft damage, soft HP damage, that helps you a lot and it's really useful. So, for example, here at 100, you have a 100% chance of double the amount of fatal hard HP to be transformed into soft HP. This is really good, and it depends on your luck. So you only want to be using rings and stuff. That already happens. So based on your natural luck, you already have some percentage that this might happen. But with this battle survival, you are much tougher basically. With those last few bits, last hurrahs. Demolition is pretty much a specific thing on its own. You want to go with demolition with the mate that has intelligence, but that's for using the trebuchets. But besides that, you have like in the beginning the torches that do early damage, siege damage unless you can use a sledgehammer. But you also have the siege torch at 30. Those are really useful. They also get scaled with depending on your demolition skill. You can also light wicks, extinguish wicks at 0, so basically anybody can do it, right? You can also wreck stuff if you have the permissions for to do it. Like wreck stuff is basically non-constructed building, so you go to a non-constructed building and you can wreck it for enemies or for yourself if you're doing some stuff in base. At 60 you unlock the trebuchets, the fire rotate trebuchets. The more intelligence you have, the more rotation angles you basically have. And at 90, just more damage with the torches and whatnot. Yeah, you can shoot cows at 100. That is indeed fun. So that's pretty much everything with regards to the skill tree lines and the secondary skills. And we already show you what every 30, 60, and 90 skill caps unlock. We're gonna go show you some basic builds to get into, and we're gonna get into the stats after that. For like in the next video with regards to PvP, we're gonna be doing a lot of the more weird builds and more detailed builds with regards to specific differences and advantages of some of them. So in this case, my main character is a spearman, so I go full spearman and I go 90 swordsman. After that, I only have 30 points left. So you can choose your builds basically with the skill cap you have for 100, unless you increase intelligence. It's not common, but I'm going to show you some builds in the next video that will increase your intelligence. You'll have a little bit more skill points. So in that case, you can actually go some extra stuff. For example, I could be going equip on maintenance to use some poisons with my spears. That's some variations. You have to adjust your points to what you have. So basically, right now, like I'm full build on this guy, and I have 60, 160 on the spear level on the spear skill tree, and I have 60, 90, 30 on my earth skill tree. Sorry, I've been studying this one at a while. I'm just going to show you a couple of variations. So what this unlocks for me is that the things that are really special about this build is the being able to run with shield and spear shield, and I'll shield bash a lot. So I do want to be using my boar spear and shield a lot, and sometimes if I need to anti-cav I can indeed pick up a gisarm and still use it. I just have to raise my strength a little bit, but we're going to talk about that in a second. And the swordsman, for example, I can turtle, so like I have both the shield and spear out or the swordsman and spear out. So depending on the type of enemy I'm fighting, I can be using my sword and shield. I can turtle with my shield in the back. I can use my spear with my shield as well. Sometimes there's some shield bugs, so like sometimes the shield you see the shield will be buggy for you. You'll have to remove your weapons, or maybe just remove the shield while you still have a weapon, and you put some distance between you and the enemy, and then you basically get your shield out again. You'll figure those out when they pop up. We might do a video later on with about bugs and bug fixes in the game, but yeah, this is this variation of the build. Let's go see the stats that I use for this one. So stats, you have strength, agility, constitution, intellect, willpower, and luck. Luck you can use basically raise by using rings or somebody pray with God's blessing or anything like that, or 100 quality skills with PvE. You get luck in those as well, but those don't affect like fighting or anything like that. Um, in this case, you're going to be checking the weapons you want to be using. So right now I have the boar spear, which is 20 strength, um, and my grossmesser, which is 18. So you ask me, well, if it takes 20 strength, why are you having 30 strength? This is because of the fractures mostly. So right now, back in the day, you could have a fracture and you just basically swing slower. It's like you didn't have the strength to use it, so the stamina it will take it too much. Then you swing really slowly and efficiently, kind of like when you're sick, someone you have the rest sickness. But in this case, you also have the stones that you can use. So for example, if you have a little bit more strength and heavier armor, you can run a little bit faster and you are able to use stuff efficiently. The weight. But basically, what you want to be doing is have at least 10 5 or 10 strength above your needed weapon. So basically, like when you get fractures, so you saw a lot of abilities that had the fractures to the enemies, right? When you apply them, let's see one for example with the assaulter, right? So in this case, no. Let's see with the Vanguard um, combos. So for example, if you do the crunchy left slash overhead right slash with the two-ended maces, you get a guaranteed fracture on the third hit, right? So when you're fighting versus people who have like the broad axe, which is one of the common ones, you're gonna be sorry, when you're fighting versus sledgehammers and mauls, my bad, it's with the two-ended maces, not axes. Although every weapon will have like a multiplier, so you can see their wound, fracture, and stun multiplier with hits and stuff like that you do. Depending on your luck, you have more chances to apply them. But yeah, to guarantee fractures, you do need them all in the sledgehammer with this particular three line. And what that's going to be doing is basically will reduce your strength. So if you're fractured, you have a broken bone, you basically cannot carry or use as much stuff as you can. So if you have a head or torso fracture, it gives you 10% like 10 points of strength less. It depends on the magnitude, but that's basically it. So if you get fracture on the head, you can see what fractures you have on this upper like little body on your screen. That's why it's there. So basically, if you have a fracture, it will show which part of the body is affected. But basically, the head and the chest, you get the 10 magnitude, and then other parts of the body, the arms and legs and whatnot, you get 5 points on that. So it depends. Like some fractures will be higher depending on the quality of the weapon or the level of the Zerker or the other skills that did fracture you. In this case, I usually go with 10 point something. Right now it's a little just 10. Just a little bit 10 over the boar spear, but if I get fractured with the boar spear, then I switch to my gross master and I can still swing it. Right now, if you don't have the strength to use a weapon, you cannot equip it, or it will be removed from your inventory. So if I was with my boar spear and somebody did like because it requires a 20 strength, and I was and I got fractured by 10 exactly. Right now, the power speed would go to my inventory, and I could not use it until I fixed that fracture or raise my strength a little bit. You can use some potions for that, so sometimes there is some potions that do raise your strength. You can use them temporarily for that, but it's not too common. Agility is basically the speed. The other thing that is used besides speed is pretty much for the bows. Like we saw, some bows have requirements of agility, bows and crossbows. So basically, the bows agility helps you aim better, but the crossbows agility helps you reload faster. So those are the two bigger differences. Pretty much the crossbows don't change a lot with regards to agility in matter uh, of their accuracy. Their accuracy is pretty much static. Back in the day, they didn't used to require any agility, kind of. So I mean, they required agility, but you can shoot them either way um, with like 0 10 agility. Basically, 10 is the minimum you can have in a certain stat. Like for example, you can see here in my intellect. But basically, what people did was like berserker with some strength and constitution, and then you could shoot a crossbow with the 10 agility. That's not so common right nowadays. Um, it's still usable. Um, right now with Constitution, that's pretty much like where you want to have most of your um, points in pretty much any builds, with some exceptions. I'll show you a couple of variations of like my 5 characters that have some PvP skills. What kind of numbers of Constitution you're looking at. My intellect is pretty much besides some specific builds that you want to go into, intellect is usually always kept at 10. You can raise it with the left click. It's pretty much like the PvP skills. You can raise them and lower them based on the with right click or left click. If it's going down, it will be the red. If it's going up, it's going to be uh, the I cannot mark it now, but it's basically like the PvP skill. So for example, I'm going to cancel this, so I can put this one going up. So right now I have 100, so it's not going to change anything, but like I can put this one going up. If I do have extra points, like I would get the extra points there. Sorry, it's the same thing with the stats. So basically, you want to be sure that you're not raising stats that you will not need later. But basically, for example, right now I'm also at the stat cap. You can see here 150 of 150. So this is not going to go up unless I lower another one. So it's a trade-off, right? Um, The willpower, I have a character that is pretty much only full willpower. It does have some demolition. I do have 12 strength in them, just to use the, funnily enough, to use the demolition thingies in case somebody attacks the base. But that's my main PvP character with regards to mining and wood processing and all that good stuff, and it carries a lot of weight. So the willpower is useful for that. And I wanted its 12 strength just so I can use a siege torch in case my base gets siege and stuff like that. But it's in most PvP characters, you really don't want to go high with that, but I do some building and some blacksmithing in base, and like 30 is kind of the minimum I kind of use for that. My farmer has a little bit more willpower just to be able to carry bigger stacks of straw and flax and stuff. But yeah, willpower also has some use with regards to soft and hard stamina. So like basically you can see here it goes 120. My hard stamina is actually 47 right now, but like it's 20 extra stamina you can play with. So for example, if I'm fighting and I have my weapon out, I'm basically in the shield. Basically, your stamina gets spent a little bit more with shield, but basically I can swing a little bit more, a few more times until I get my stamina depleted, as compared to somebody who would have the natural 100. But you really want to be watching your stamina a lot. It's not there is a few builds that you can go a little bit extra willpower just to have that extra swing or be a bit run in swing. Shield batches also spend a lot of stamina, for example. So there is a chance you actually um, want to be doing a little bit willpower for that, but I mean, it really depends on your specific build. We're going to get into more details a bit later on. I'm just going to showcase mine right now, just to have an idea of what you can do. So yeah, this spearman swordsman with some PV with PvE attributes, and I can still like do a lot of the building. It's just a little bit slower because I cannot put 7 building logs into a building at once, but so it takes a bit more of carrying cards around and stuff. But yeah, this is a cool one. And now we're going to check my in-base archer, which is a farmer. One of the things I forgot to mention in the little previous clip was that I do play a lot with skill armor. So if you're playing a lot of anti-cav, you want to play with the padded. The padded gives you a lot of protection against blunt damage and siege damage, but it's very good, very bad against slashing, piercing, and chopping. But it's fast, so it's really light armor. It weighs 1, for example, the chest. As you progress, it will weigh to up to 3, I believe, to tier 4. Yeah, so it becomes heavier by 300% almost every piece. But yeah, it's the fastest armor in the game. Many people play padded just to be fast, and then a lot of variation of weapons. But I do play with the skill a lot. The skill is a bit more forgiving with regards to the types of damage you're going to be taking. So a lot of protection against piercing and some slashing. So when I'm playing arenas, when I'm playing in the field, I usually go for the skill armor rather than the padded. But if I'm playing anti-cav on that guy, I do play with the padded. Um, it's also cheaper to make the padded. We don't need metal, so it's a little bit easier to make in that sense. But it depends. It depends on the context what you want to be using. The leather one, and right now I'm going to show you my archer. So right now the leather one is really good against siege, but very bad against most of the things. Or at least doesn't protect much, but it's also fast, so it doesn't weigh too much. It's 1.8 instead of the 1. This armor is, if you're safe, it's one of the classes that does tend to end tier 4 and tier 3s in wars, because if you're sitting in the castle tower and just shooting all day, even if you die, you're going to get your gear back unless you get pushed. So what happens with regards to the crossbow stuff that we can use for base defense and whatnot? So basically, you want to have the strength and agility that you need to use it. I actually had to test it because they changed a while back with regards to the requirements. So for example, to use this one, right now I cannot use the heavy crossbow. Why? Because my stats are 26, 30, and I have a lot of back power. So like this is not a perfect build in any way, shape or form, just because my constitution is way too low, but I need the willpower to do most of the stuff in base. So if we start getting a rest more often, I'll put it down to 40, 50 to still be able to perform in base, but I just want my willpower to be at least acceptable in some way, shape or form. With regards to the types of arrows, we already mentioned a few, but basically practice a lot with the normal types of arrows. The dull ones are usually a little bit heavier. They also require one more dull stone to hit and whatnot. But basically, you want to be using the normal weapon arrows the most. They're made with 1 feather and 1 billet or 10 branches. Um, so let's dive into those. The arbalist itself, for example, right now, this is the one I'll use it in case we get attacked immediately. So you could just right click it if you have the equip as default. Um, this weapon is good. As soon as you pull it out, it will reload. But as you see, like I cannot move unless I press R again. If I press R, it cancels the animation of of the reloading and have to do it again. But if you get in a tricky situation, you just want to run, you can basically press R. When you press R with a bow or you press 3 or something to equip it, you go to first person. So I actually changed my G key to be first person. I'm going to talk as well about the switch I did for the swords. So basically this oh, I don't have more ammo. Oh, I do. Oh, yeah, because I don't have the ammo equipped. It did the action, but it didn't actually equip it. So you need to equip your ammo in number 1 or 2, usually 2. So when you double click it, it goes there automatically. So now when I do the reload action, it will reload rather than just doing the animation, not actually reloading, because it's looking for the arrow, let's say. This one, I'm not even sure, like, oh, it's actually not too bad. Um, because I use the in third part, I'd like to shoot from third person just because I can see my surroundings a little bit more. You can shoot it in first person as well. It's a little bit more straight. I mean, the aim at least works. So you can see there, it was a little bit more accurate, just a tiny little bit. It was kind of almost in the inner. Um, but you don't need that much strength and agility to use this one. So the arbalist, you unlock it at 0. Obviously, the more points you have in range, the more damage you'll be doing. The reason I go for this 60, 90, 60 is because I do use the shards and composites. Right now I can find a composite, it should be somewhere. But you can use the arbalist also to the same effect of base protection. Like, it already does some decent damage, nothing like the heavy crossbow, 100%, but it already does some damage. The crossbow and the composite and the short bow are really good options to have. Um, it also equips it a different way. So, for example, if I had my shield on my back, so I'm going to put the shield, and I'm going to say why I have a bastard sword and why I have the cavalry in a second, but that's specific for the in-base build that you're doing. Um, so in this case, I did keep my shield, so you saw it removed my 4. But for example, this is really good while you're reloading, because if I'm reloading, I can turn my shield to the enemy if I'm being shot at when I'm static. So that's some good adaptation. You have to move your mouse a little bit, but basically you can shoot and reload at the same time as you have your shield, right? Um, so yeah, Pavis shields are really useful. This is the demonstration of the dropping the Pavis that I was talking about before. So if you're like this, you can right click and use Pavis, and to position the Pavis on the ground in front of you, so you can basically get cover from it, you know. So you can put the pavis down. If you know you don't get pushed, don't do this with your head like I just did, because in that case you're gonna you can get shot through it because your head is popping out of it. But yeah, it's a good protection if you're trying to hold a line of some sort. And for example, if you want to bring the sword now, I can press Alt 3 to keep my sword. Um, and if you want to make pushes around it, when you use the shortcuts, don't forget it always go for the first slot that the thing is available. So the shields will also go for 4. But for example, uh, in this case, I did have the heavy crossbow there. But in this case, when you use the 3, it will switch your weapons on the number 3, because that's the first available slot for them. That's you have to get used to that and whatnot. But basically, you with time you know what goes where, and that will help you out. So let's try to. Oh, I actually don't have the minimum agility for it. Oh, I do. So for the short bow, what you want to be using is arrows instead of balls, obviously. And yeah, you can still drop the pavis, so you can equip the pavis, put it down, and then use your arrows, right? And then if you want to take the pavis back, it will go to your 4, but you're not going to be using it as a shield in your back. So the short bow does have like a little bit of a curve, so you have to adjust it a little bit. In third person, I do play with uh, with the with the bows and crossbows. I do play with third person. Maybe get a crosshairs uh, for your for your screen. You can use the in-screen crosshairs, and it's really common. It's not against the TOS, sorry. The crossbow is really useful, but when you're shooting long distances, it does have a bit of a drop down. So you know, yeah, unless you're aiming insanely high, you're not going to be hitting your targets a lot. So if I want to be shooting there, I have to almost aim at the top of the cast walls to actually get the shot in the pit there. But it has its uses. The composite's a bit more straight, but yeah, pretty much bows go on 3, arrows go on 4 for pretty much all of them. And you also have the knives for sword that we're talking about. So the knives are kind of fun. You have to play a bit with their angles, and all the javelins and throwing knives and stuff have different angles that you can throw them at. But they're fun and they're good. Like if you need something fast to shoot at enemies running at them or running at you, and you're playing with other types of weapons, that can be useful. It's a good secondary build, but especially for the NAFTA. The NAFTA, I cannot use NAFTA because I don't have 90, but the NAFTA is good. It has a couple of requirements now that it didn't used to have in the past. Basically, you only had the 90 and you could go with the full Berserker build and 90 thrower just to use the NAFTA. Now you do require at least some agility. Many Berserkers already have it, but The strength is also a common trait for the berserkers. So yep. They just need to keep they stack in trees, which means that you have to be changing a lot of times, either double clicking or bringing into inventory or having them in a bar. But yeah, Nafta is really powerful, although it has been a little bit nerfed. Um, with regards to the sword. So, for example, in this case, because I'm breeding warhorse, I'm doing warhorse training. I do need to ride the horses to certain types of horses to train them. So, for example, to train a heavy, I need to be able to ride a hardy warhorse. In this case, I will need to have the 60 to ride the Spiriton and Hardys to then train them and to use them and whatnot. So I do have that, and my secondary weapon, instead of like a normal sword and shield like I have at Warfront, is the bastard one. That's why I have a little bit more strength as well. The bastard sword is a really good sword. And it's a fun one. It's one of those 1.5 ones, uh, but yeah, it's really useful. Let me make sure that I leave the. I can use the Pavis. I can use the. I can lift the Pavis. You can repair it while it's put down. But if you put it like this, it means that you actually will have to move it like that again to reposition it, or you have to have the space on your back to actually take it back. So if you have the arrows there, you have to indeed remove the arrows, and then you press use Pavis and just go to your back. This is something obviously when you have some time set up. Otherwise, it's a bit tricky to do. But yeah, this is pretty much all about for with regards to the archer. Um, there we go with the beautiful emotes for the video, and we're gonna be right back and show you my other three fighters. So the others are the main PvPers, and they're usually out of the base, but some of them are in the base, and we're gonna show you in a bit. This character is the siege one I was mentioning, and it has 107 willpower and a 12 strength, so full back size. We're gonna go checking my archer swordsman now, and the archer swordsman is one of the main characters usually have at war, so you can use a long and heavy crossbow. So it goes 40-45 with strength and agility, so then you can use both. I'm not protected against fracture, so if I do get fractured in the battlefield, I have to again switch to my sword and do what must be done with it. 45-40, sorry, and then the rest constitution, no intellect, no willpower, just This is a proper war build, let's say. So right now I have like the sword combos. So yep, you can basically do your sword combos easily. So when you draw, you have the special attack. Then you can have at 60 swordsman, you can have the right thrust and left. So for example, right thrust and left, right thrust and left. If you want to test it, sometimes these combos are popping up when you're not hitting anything, but we're gonna show you in the dummy just so you can see it there. So 1, 2, 3, and the same thing with the reverse. So 1, 2, 3, and it will do the special attack. For some reason right now it's not popping the variation of the damage. But yes, in this case the flurry of bows is a really useful one. Um, the other one will be the 1,000 cuts, so the overhead right slash left slash. So the special attack first, and then overhead right slash left slash. You saw there the thing popping with the red on top of my screen, and I give the special attack there. You can check like compared to even normal hits that it will do more damage depending on the swings. Like some weapons have better swings than others. You can test that for exactly every weapon just by hitting a dummy. That's a really good way to go about it. Um, and then like I have zero skull. I don't use war skull much at wars. You need to be really up close sometimes, and mates have a lot of agility. What I do in this one is I do have the ranger to 100 because I always use the long bows and heavy crossbows. So for example, what I'm doing now, because I've also the swordsman, I also use the swordsman shield instead of the pavis, so I can shield bash. The pavis doesn't shield bash. So for example, if I'm doing a push with the guildies, I go along with to hold the door and stuff like that. I'll hold it with the I'll hold the shield in front of you. So what you want to be doing is pretty much covering the entire angle. You can put two people here, but one is enough for this type of opening. Depending on the size of the shield as well, you've got to be taking some damage as you do. But to defend caps and counter caps, that's really useful. Then when I'm doing my normal shooting and whatnot, because of my agility, I can run faster than most mates. But basically, what you can do is is running with your bow and arrow, and when they get up close, you switch the shit to the sword, you whack them down a little bit, and after that, you basically, if you do need to make pushes, or if you have time, or you have other mates chasing the enemies, you can go after them and shield bash them as well, to then guarantee a kill or anything like that, you know. Yeah, this is a cool build. This is a cool build that I use a lot, especially for wars. Everything is pretty much set tuned to pure PvP, but it's a fun one. Don't forget, PvP is almost there. One day in 11 hours. Some of my some of my fighters do have the 100 because they spend a little bit more time in base digging or at warfronts. Um, but yeah, it's you always want to have the healer on your PvP. So what I do when I start a new PvP character is make sure I have the stats that I want. Make sure I always have the 1 million experience, so it goes into the skills, and then you want to have the healing. So usually the base when I have 60, 60, 60, and 1 million XP, and then go off to wars and stuff like that. And whenever I have a chance, I'll help at some more front stuff that I can do to get that extra points, the extra points there. Oh, somebody just fell from the skies. Right now we're going to be looking at a Berserker. This is also a war character, so very little willpower. The Berserker right now is doing our lovely null videos, so he's at our null camp base. Usually do that naked or with tier 0. Let's see if we have his Y-hander lying around and whatnot. We might not. But basically, this is mostly about the build. Like we're gonna do in-depth videos with regards to we're gonna do 1v1 arenas with other mates, especially two mates that I play a lot with. No, we don't have Zweihanders, but we have a Chieftain Sword that will do the trick, I guess. And we have the Broadaxe that demonstrates part of what we want. And let's get a Sledgehammer. Sledgehammers really will mess up the dummies a bit because of their siege damage, but hopefully let's not break one here. Um, yeah, so the Broadaxe is pretty much straightforward. Let's talk about the build first, actually. So I have 100, 190, and 99.9, just because to avoid that formation color difference. There is not much boost there is no difference in boost from 99.99, just the color difference. So I have it a little bit below 100, so I can have the old blue one, and I can still have the move and most of the boost to the calls you want to make. I don't have a mate here at our null base right now. But you basically have to have somebody else in your unit, and then you can use it by yourself. So you basically Alt 4 and Alt 3 to give the boost. So Alt 4 to put the circle, and then Alt 3 to give the boost of the movement, Alt 2 to hold the ground, and Alt 1 to actually make the charge, and we have the extra damage on the enemy. Regards to build itself, pretty much PvE wise is pretty much the same. Funnily enough, is also 1 day away from it. 17 hours actually, away from the 100 dealer as well. But yeah, this Berserker build is pretty much full Zerker build, and then unit formation. I might be switching it up to Drawer 90 again, since I do have the stats to use. Whenever you want to check the stats, you go to the pods. Careful, the Drawer, this is not an afterbody, it's a Gloom Bomb. It's completely different than the naphtha pot. That's the one you want to be using at wars and whatnot. So 40-20, we definitely have the 40-20. I'm readjusting a bit because I definitely went too much with the strength yesterday doing the null camps. For the next video that's popping out soon, for the third part of the null camp clearing, I do use 40 agility a lot sometimes, so I go for the 40 agility when I need to fight naked. For example, at Warfront we had low on gear, or early Warfront we might not have too much gear. I go full agility to then use the Broadaxe or the Zweihander or whatever weapon we're using at the moment. Um, the constitution is variable, so like I could go 60 strength only and then 30, or I could go agility, or I could go 60 strength and then 10 agility and max and 40, 55, 60 constitution. There is some variations to this. It's a matter of flavor. We're going to go into detailed builds with regards to Zerkers with a Zerker friend of ours in the arena later, at some point. The combos that you have to learn, they're pretty much based on type of weapon you're using. So for example, if you do prefer the swords a lot, I'm better with swords than the Broadaxe 100%. But if you do prefer the swords a lot, you can practice the combos against dummies. But the parries ones you have to practice against other people, because you cannot parry a dummy. The dummy does attack you back, right? But basically the thrust, left swing, right swing. Let's do it. So thrust, left swing, right swing, or vice versa. And you see there the thingy popped up at the bottom of my Zerker. Um, Thrust, left swing, and now when you try to do the combo, sometimes you'll not have enough for the to do the last hit. But that's a really good combo. Um, the other combo you have, this is the overhead left swing thrust. So doing it again, sorry, pulling it out. You also the special attack. So the special attack when you unlock the weapon, you can see there it popped. There we go. And that's usually overhead, but not always. In this case, for this weapon, is always overhead. But basically, let's do this one. Up, side, thrust. And this is the dismember one. This is really good for the to try to apply the stun with the last one. Knockdown, sorry. Um, they're useful and they're quite viable in war just because weapons are so big. You're going to be hitting many of those hits. Careful with the friendly damage, especially this weapon. This weapon has a lot of it has a lot of range. It does spend a lot of stamina, but the hitbox is huge. Also to parry and stuff, you have to practice a lot with it for the pairing because pairing is really important as Berserker. When you go to Vanguard, so right now I can use both the two-handed swords and whatnot, and I can use the Vanguard sledgehammers and all that stuff. You have the Nil before me, the overhead thrust overhead. So basically overhead, thrust, overhead. That's one of the combos for the Berserker. The thrust doesn't do a lot of damage and is sometimes hard to hit. Most people just swing right and left with it just because the damage is insane. But you have to calculate your distance to the whatever you're doing. If I'm too close, it's either not gonna count or it's gonna do blunt damage. So you're gonna have to get used to whatever weapon you're using. So you see, I'm way too close to the target. It's not even doing blunt damage. But if I get a good distance, it's gonna be doing the appropriate amount of damage. It's harder to do when you're running and versus characters that move a lot, but it's really good versus shields and whatnot. Also with the Berserker, you have the ability that is kind of fun. So basically, if you're using you can jump. So for example, this little hop, it allows you sometimes to get extra jump if you're actually running while using it. So sometimes you can jump higher distances with it than you could do with a normal jump with Garrett's to horizontal speed, horizontal acceleration. Um, and it also allows you to pounce. So this little pounce. It's really good versus shields. So if somebody's like trying actively blocking with the shield, you can pounce into them. We're gonna showcase some demonstrations at some point, but this is a really good ability in certain situation depending on the context. With the Berserker abilities that we talked about, I have them all C, V, B, N. So I pretty much changed all my I changed my abilities to do it. So we have the taunt, we have the Hark to remove poisons and slows, and we have the N and the V. So the V in this case is the coward, and the N is the your mine. So the coward I cannot do because I don't have a target. So you have to be looking at the person with your weapon out, and you can cover them, and they will fall after a bit. If they're not in fighting stance, obviously, and the N is to increase your speed towards the target and whatnot. And right now I don't have a target available. I don't think I can do it versus dummies. No. But yeah, that's pretty much it for Berserkers. Berserkers have the best web armors and definitely the strongest damage dealing weapons and the crazy abilities. They're pretty much the only ones that have these crazy shout abilities and whatnot. That's why they call it Berserker rather than the Vanguard or Assaulter. But yeah, Berserker line is pretty much fun, and I definitely recommend having one Berserker just to see how OP it is. And they're really useful for null camps because they have a lot of types of damage, for example, versus the nulls. So in this case, like you have slashing damage, you have chopping damage, you have siege damage, you have blunt damage. So it's the most versatile one with regards to damage types. So Berserker is pretty much the go-to. At some point in the Chinese server that we were playing before, like 80% of the people were Berserkers, so they actually couldn't figure out how to put coward to work properly with the code, so it would only activate in when non-fighting stance, so it was activating in fighting stances, and they had to remove the complete Berserker ability of coward. Then they had to start removing some of the weapon combos because they were being glitched and whatnot. That was a mistake. Um, and yeah, so basically try out the Berserker. There are some variations, so instead of information, you can have some thrower or some combat battle survival. That's what I used in the Chinese a lot in the Chinese server. You can also try to go for a shield in the back, so you can use a shield in the back at the same time as you have the weapons out, so you're not using the weapons with the shield at the same time necessarily. There's also some Berserkers who go Spearman. Um, or crossbow. There's so many variations. We're going to go into detail in some of those, but this is the basic Berserker build. Maybe I would adjust here to 55, 60, depending on how much above the fracture point you want. So these weapons are a bit on the heavier side, 47 and 50, but I mean they're definitely worth using. The sledgehammer, it does require 50, but if you're using, for example, a maul already requires a 60, so you have like 60 plus the fracture points. You will need 70 strength to use them all regularly and have the fracture over the fracture points. So yeah, it's a little bit trickier to use, but I mean, there's some specialized builds that are really fun to do. So the last build that I do have is my Cavalier. My cavalry is completely naked now. He's actually he got to that 100 beautiful healing that my other mates have not, because his mate spends a lot of time but he's actually getting him to shovel faster. Beautiful. But yeah, you want that healing on all of PvP characters. This is my main Lancer. He did die yesterday in the IBs that you might have seen in the other video. And I do have Lancer with anti-cav. So there's a couple of variations to this, but we'll get into those later. So basically I go for the full Lancer, so I have the max damage from my lances, and I can use the tier 4 as well. Some cavs do use the tier 4, so the leather and the cavaliers are mostly the ones that use the higher tiers ones, because the cavs obviously are sitting on a horse, so the weight doesn't matter as much, and the archers obviously can play a little bit safer, so they can stay in the tower. Most of the others just use tier 1 and tier 2s in wars. In arenas there might be a couple of tier 3s and tier 4s popping, or 100 quality weapons, but you don't find those commonly in the battlefields. So with regards to Lancer build, like I pretty much get 60, so I can ride all the types of horses that exist. I do not. I'm passing on basically having lower chance to fall from saddles and the iron grip. But I'm basically going for Lancer. So like with the Berserker video, we're gonna have um, we're gonna have a mate do it with us in arenas, and for the Cavaliers, actually that gentleman over there, this mate that has already showed up in the video, Mr. Boko, is gonna be the one doing a full detailed tutorial on Cavalier later on, and he's gonna show us some good stuff that is a bit more advanced. Is a good fellow, and I'm gonna annoy them to do the Cavalier video with me at some point. But basically, what this build also allows you to do is to anti-cav versus mates. So I can use the Gisarme, or I can use the medium pikes with 60-60 on those, on Spearman and on Guard, and those are really good to unharness people. If it's HGH, for example, you can steal the horse instantaneously. So you unharness somebody, you don't even fight them. You just go straight for horse, and you can take the horse away. That's really useful. And my bread and butter, instead of the sword, so I could use a shield and sword instead of the spear line. But my bread and butter versus for PvP is pretty much boar spear. So straight boar spear with none of the chill stuff. And yeah, I could go 90 here to increase maybe a little bit damage, or maybe use the long pike. That's a variation that many people do go for instead of the guard. But the Gisarme is really good at fighting handicap as well, so it's a bit of a preference kind of case. Because if you're really good with pikes, like definitely go for the 90 on Spearman. But if you like the Gisarme, you have to go the 60 there, just as a matter of assortment of points. And with regards to the stats, what you want to be doing is basically be able to use all the lances plus the boar spear. The boar spear is smaller than the lances. In this case, we want to be able to use all of them, so this will be to 30. I have a little bit extra just because sometimes when riding horses you're going real fast and stuff, and you have a lot of some fractures, and you cannot use a lance. You're basically out of the fight. A lot of constitution, no agility is needed because you're riding horses, you're not running. Zero intellect, some willpower. Some people like to prefer to have 25, 30, just to be able to carry a few more horses, or carrying them without being overburdened. But it's again a matter of flavor preference. Constitution is good because when you're fighting other lancers or anti-cavs, you're going to take some damage if they do land a hit on you rather than the horsey, and you want to be able to survive and whatnot. So yeah, um, those are my builds. Like we're going to do into detailed variations of some. Like we have both screenshots. Will teach you how to do the parries and the combos. This one's this build particularly doesn't have combos. It's basically a simple one. But it does have the cav anti-cav variation, which is quite useful in many war settings, IBs and whatnot. It's good. If I lose my horsey, I can get the boar spear and fight people, or I can get my Gizarme and fight other horses. It's really useful, and that's all for my fighters and my PvP characters. We're going to be making specific videos on Berserker, Lancing, and Swordsman. Those are kind of planned, and we're going to have some collaborations with some mates that are a bit more proficient in those particular three lines than me. Just check out our future videos. We're just going to have a little look at rock, paper, scissors kind of situation of when different styles or different PvP um, classes meet each other. Um, so to have an overview, we're gonna break down like how each class will kind of fight each other, but we're gonna have specific videos on those interactions and how to handle those situations in the future. So just for you to have an idea, right? So well, obviously the lancers, you have a bit of a difference with your kind of a hardy lancer or a heavy lancer. With the rangers, obviously, you have if you're playing crossbows versus bows, you have more shots versus higher damage shots and stuff like that, and abilities. So that does play off a little bit. But between the three melee classes, the way it usually works is shields are kind of like the rock. The axes can be the paper, I guess, but I mean, broad axes are indeed way too strong to be called paper, but let's say that the shields are the rock, the axes are the paper, and then you have the swords that are the uh, scissors. So in a sense, what you have is in case the axes mess up the shields a lot. So like they take a lot of durability, they do a lot of damage. The swords also, depending on the sword, it also has a benefit of doing blunt damage. So when you're holding a shield and you're blocking, what is basically happening is a lot of your damage gets converted to soft damage. Instead of like hard damage, even if the weapon was as a high percentage of hard hit points damage type. Um, so the shield blocks some of that. So for example, if I'm fighting versus one axe, instead of using my spear and my shield, what I do is I'll switch to normal spearing and then try to turtle or run away a little bit because the shield does make me slower to do that kind of build. Or I would go proper turtle sword and try to go whack at their feet and stay really close together so their axes, if it's a double-handed axe, so they cannot get the range on me to actually give the attack. If you remember from the berserker, you need to have a little bit of distance to hit with the tip of the double broad axe there. So that's a solution. Or if they seem to be a little bit more on the faster side and can get distance, I'll try to use my speed against it, even with the scale armor, to get my distance and my speed against them and try to poke them and pull back out. You can also turtle when you pull back out to be sure that you're kind of covered. Usually you use your left side for covering because the left side is much more covered than your right, as you can see here, when you have your weapon out. Um, Another situation is the Zweihanders and whatnot. The Zweihanders, they are always looking for your parry or to parry you or you to parry them to get some special attacks and obviously watch their combos. So if you know when a combo is coming, you know, oh shit, that was a thrust. Let me block the right or left swing. Or if you miss the first, you know how to parry the second. But some of the combos are unparryable or unblockable by the third hit, so do be careful about that. Um, with regards to the one-hand axes, they're not so common, the same thing with the Earthscale weapons, but when they are, some of the mates really know how to play them really well, so be really careful. They need to be really up close to you, but they are not commonly used in arenas and whatnot, but well, sometimes there is a couple of crazy people. With regards to the spears, usually they try to keep their distance, right? That's why they play spears and whatnot. There's a couple of good mates, like we mentioned before, that do use pikes to even do melee damage and melee fights. Although that's not too common, there's a couple of people playing disarms in melee fights that could also be doable, but not so easy, a bit tricky. Um, yeah, and that's pretty much it. Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and have a good day. See you next time.